Hi, this is Terry, and this is It's About Writing. And today we have David Rawlings with us from Australia. He's here from the future for me. He's in the next day, I'm in the past day, but we're so excited to be together, and I'm excited to have you on. You have some wonderful books and wonderful things to say to writers. So, David, why don't you just tell us about yourself and your writing?
First of all, thanks so much for having me, Terry. It's great to be talking to you. About my writing, I write fiction with a heart. So I'm writing speculative stories that have been described as modern day parables, taking a concept or a series of values or even just something that people need to address and wrapping it up in fiction. So I'm now 3 novels into my fiction career. The first novel was The Baggage Handler. That came out in 2019, which was about 7 or 8 years ago now. Well, it feels like it. The Baggage Handler is the one that won the Christy Award for the best debut novel of 2019. That was followed by The Camera Never Lies, which is another modern day parable. The Baggage Handler dealt with, unsurprisingly, baggage and how people can address and deal with emotional baggage. The Camera Never Lies has at its heart the value of honesty, particularly in relationships. And so that's a story of a marriage counsellor. And it's a story of how he is gifted by his grandfather a camera that reveals his secrets. And he then has faced with a dilemma of, I tell everybody for a living to reveal their secrets and be honest with their partners, but I'm not doing that with my wife. So that's the second one. And the third one is actually written and based here in Australia. So this is a story called Where the Road Bends, which came out last year in 2020. And this one's based in the outback. And the story of this one is about where are you on the road of life and how are you going to get to where you need to go to or where you want to go to. So that was a fun story because it's based in my country. So I got to talk about the red earth of the Central Australia and throw in all the critters that try to kill us every day over here in Australia. And yeah, no, it was good fun. So that's my three books. And I guess I'm putting my faith and values into my writing in a way to make people think. So, and I had a number of people who've emailed me about The Baggage Handler, which is about 3 people who don't realize the baggage that they're carrying. And people have said, I didn't know. I had no idea that I was dealing with this. I had no idea that I was burying it. Thanks for at least, allowing me to think about it and process it. So yeah, stories with a message, a little bit speculative, but they're all based in the real world. So no dragons or fairies or anything like that.
Yeah. I really love that kind of writing, and I love putting a theme in fiction because I think it's so much more accessible to learn something through fiction, through a story.
Oh, exactly. And I find too, I mean, we live in a really polarized world where we used to have people on either end and then there was a whole group in the middle. And in the last 4 or 5 years, it's gone like that. And the whole concept of discussion or even rumination or reflection on things has sort of disappeared under a weight of 280 character tweets that start and end an argument in one hit. So to be able to write about concepts that will actually free people if they think about it, it's exciting for me because I mean when I get an email through from someone who reads The Camera Never Lies and says, you know what, we read this together, myself and my husband, and we're now talking about things that we haven't before. I consider that the reason why I write.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So I would like to pick your brain about that. How do you take a theme and then come up with a really good story that would illustrate that theme, Yeah.
So what I usually do is I start a book with a question. So for example, with The Baggage Handler, the question I started thinking about the things that we carry, and not just me, but the people that I see. And I started with the question of what would you do with the baggage you didn't realize you were carrying? And then that sort of led to an idea which then further developed. And honestly, once I started thinking about that question, this story arrived one night. I grabbed my laptop. I was thinking about the question. You know what it's like when you're a writer, you just can't get these ideas out of your head. And I grabbed my laptop thinking about the question and jumped out of bed and headed into the lounge room And 4 hours later, I basically had the structure of the baggage handler on the page, but it was all circulating around that question. Same thing with The Camera Never Lies, is that's based around the question of what would you do if your secrets were revealed and there was nothing you could do to stop it? So rather than saying, I'm going to write a book about honesty, or I'm going to write a book about baggage, questions are really engaging, and questions demand an answer. And I find that when I read books that are pretty obviously based around a theme, they can feel a bit preachy, whereas a question is more engaging. So with all of my books, I've started with a question.
That's great.
And that's how I keep on track, because I'm not coming back to what do I need to say. It's how do I keep the conversation going?
I love that. I noticed on your website that you have a blog and you have a lot of things to say to writers.
Yeah.
The one I just saw tonight was, or this morning.
Yesterday for me, yeah.
Yeah. Ways that writers can think visually.
Yeah.
And that's another way is to make it really come alive. Could you tell us a few things about that?
Sure. So I've developed a style over a number of years, even though I've only been writing fiction really for the past 4 or 5. So my background is in copywriting. I've been putting words on the screen, put food on the table for 30 years. But one thing I've realized is that when you tell stories, it's the picture you paint as well as the message that sort of underpins it. So I like to think visually when I'm writing, because essentially that's what we're doing. When we're reading a novel, I mean, I've never been to Middle Earth, but I can picture it.
Right.
Because Tolkien, doesn't just use a brush, he uses the whole palette to paint a world. And so I'm trying to think visually as well, because we live on these things nowadays.
Yeah.
And everything about our world is visual. And so I think to help engage with people, if I can, particularly with Where the Road Bends, I mean, that's based in outback Australia, to be able to paint a picture and talk about, the roads that go on until they kiss the horizon, and talking about clouds of white galahs and cockatoos, and trying to get people to visualize the story I believe helps them immerse themselves in it. And once they're in the story, that engagement process is deepened even further. So yeah, I think as writers, the writers I've spoken to, and certainly from my experiences, we tend to focus on words as text. But if we're doing it well, I mean, we're painting a story, we're introducing new friends, we're creating scenarios where we can drop ourselves, right in the middle of it. So that's what I mean by thinking visually. It's not just, don't tell me about, what happened, show me. Make me see the street in Victorian England or the road in outback Australia, so that I can really connect with the story. And the great writers, the ones that I love, do that really, really well.
We always hear that show, don't tell.
Yeah.
But we really need to think about it a little more sometimes.
Oh, totally. And the other thing I say to people that I'm working with or sharing stories was, we often tell in our first draft. That's okay, because it's a first draft. It's never going to be published. But if you tell in a first draft, what you can do in your second draft is, all right, you've got the numbers, now paint in the colors. And you can actually revert from description from the point of view of action, or, he was 36. She was 85. You can start to talk about leathery papered skin sort of stretched over a very thin frame. And suddenly that gives you the visual side of it. But that's always second draft stuff for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, get your story down first. And then you're sort of free to get the creative side of it more.
And I find too, that helps me keep pacing, because one thing I hear a lot when people, respond or send me a message about the book is, I couldn't put it down. I think I've been responsible for more insomnia than I care to acknowledge, but I think
that's the thing.
that's right. I mean, and that's about the pacing of the story. And I think too, that's another thing that I've sort of brought from my 30 years of corporate experience is, when you're in advertising, when you're in the social media space, everything has got to move fast. Now, that doesn't work in some genres. That's why I clearly don't write historical romance, because you need to actually soak in that world. You can't just bang, 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 bang. But I find with the stuff that I write is that it's got a pace to it.
Mm-hmm.
And moving the visuals to a bit later in the process enables me to do that.
Yeah, that's so great. So, and your website also talked about you doing a lot of speaking engagements, and it looks like you
Yeah.
speak all about writing to writers.
Yep.
How's that been going during COVID? Have you had any?
I find that whenever I talk to anybody, it's always surrounded by that little
Yeah.
Zoom. No, it's strange the way COVID's been affecting us down here in Australia, because realistically, when you look at the numbers, Australia is pretty much on top of COVID.
Good.
But my marketplace and the people that I'm connecting with in the US, I mean, you're dealing with a different data set and different way of approaching COVID completely. So I find that the speaking has changed, but it's evolved into something. So, and I'm finding that people, when writing, because there's so many things that you can watch online, people tend to be more specific about stuff. So, I mean, late last year, I did a Zoom session for people in the northwest of the US, part of the Northwestern Christian writers up in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't talk about writing. We talked about how to use video to talk about your writing as an author. So it was very specific.
Oh.
Whereas 2019, I was talking to writing groups down here in Australia about the process of putting words on screen, putting words on page. How do you go from first draft to second? And drawing a lot from my corporate experience as well, of how do you encapsulate who you are and what you do in 15 words. So we've gone a lot more specific since COVID, I've found.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, because even I have gone online to just like let me get some quick instruction on this specific thing that I'm doing right now in my story.
Yep. Yeah.
So I can relate to that. Do you have any workshops online that we could go and check out? Or
actually, I'm developing some at the moment. I do corporate workshops I run my own business, and so I've been doing that, converting those across, and the next ones are the writing ones to draw from. And honestly, I'm applying corporate writing experience for decades into fiction now. So it's drawn from both, because I realize that, I'm 3 books into a career, and the people I admire are 33 or 63 or 93 books into a career.
yeah.
But the principles of communication, generally speaking, are applicable, some of them in the world of fiction as well. So, but yeah, keep an eye on my website, because there will be stuff available where, there'll be resources to help you with a specific skill, or just a bite size. How do I think about this? How do I think about that? I put out a blog post through one of the platforms recently that talked about, it's now February. How do you know that you're on track with your goals for the year? Because when New Year's Eve rolls around, everybody makes a resolution, and us writers, we grab a word for the year and we determine that our word count per day is going to be 1,500. But then by February, and school's back in swing, and the weather changes, and work starts to bite, everything starts to change. So yeah, there'll be some stuff available on the website, which is really specific. And it will be bite-sized advice.
Okay. And I signed up for your newsletter, so
thank you.
I'll be able to hear through that if something's coming out too. Okay.
Yeah. The newsletter. I mean, I'm also trying to connect with readers as well as writers. So there's often a book giveaway or something rather like that. But I'm finding a lot of readers are writers, and those readers who aren't writers want to be writers.
Right.
Which is great. Which is terrific. So
yeah. I think a lot of people who are not interested in reading, they just the only thing they read are just little bite-sized things they have to read, But
we live in a social media world. I mean, our information flow is controlled by our thumb and our phone, and we just flick through stuff. So yeah, it's got to be bite-sized, because that's what people are doing.
Right. Well, is there anything else you would like to say to writers, or maybe beginning writers?
Yeah, I just want to encourage people. One of the things I found with particularly COVID and lockdowns was the constant advice was, you've got all this free time, you can write a novel. And I know a number of writers, and this happened to me, where your motivation was actually elsewhere, or it was just hard. I know with me, when COVID was really hitting down here, I was spending 110% of my time trying to protect my business.
Mm.
And so when you're told that this is a perfect time to write, but it actually isn't, that can be really discouraging.
Right.
So anybody who's writing, I just encourage you to take care of yourself as well,
Mm.
because I know the word that I really don't want to hear again, and I'm about to use it, is the word unprecedented.
Mm.
We live in unprecedented times, and it's not as simple as, oh, you're locked down for the next month. That's great. Grab a laptop and bang out a novel, because that's not how creativity works.
Right.
It's certainly not how good creativity works. And so I just encourage people to give themselves some slack. It's okay to take your time,
Mhm.
and it's okay to work with what you've got around you. And we're always feeling under pressure as writers that we're not writing enough, we're not marketing enough, we're not speaking enough, we're not connecting enough. I know when my third book came out, 2020, I was in the process of launching one, marketing the second book, The Camera Never Lies, marketing the first book because it had just won the Christy Award,
Yeah.
trying to write book 4. And after a while, you just feel like you're not doing enough
Yeah.
well. So my encouragement to anybody who's just starting is enjoy it, but take care of yourself during the process.
Mm. That's so
Because
good.
I know writers who've told me, privately, that their creativity came to a grinding halt in 2020. And when I find out why, it's because, their mother passed away from COVID,
Wow.
or husband lost the job. And it's like, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up about it. Just
Yeah.
enjoy it. Go back to it. The best stories I read that I really enjoy, I can tell the writer enjoyed it too.
Yes.
So try and look after yourself in the process, and try and give yourself permission to, step back if you need to, step sideways if you need to,
Yeah.
and just, make sure that the work you put on the page is something you're proud of and that you enjoy doing.
I so appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Pleasure.
I know there's people who are just, even if someone in their family didn't pass away, they know someone, or it's just there's a weight, and
Yeah.
that's really good.
Yeah. And I would like to see writers do well as writing do well.
Mm-hmm.
And so caring for yourself is something that I think we all need to do collectively and amongst each other. But yeah, if you're writing, it's okay to walk away for a couple of days. And I know what it feels like. And I know that 2-3 years ago that the last person to accept that advice would have been me. But you've got to look after yourself in the process. And I think your writing will be better for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Well, let's see. What else did I have? If there's, oh, so you said on your website that you have been using writing your whole life to pay the bills.
Yep.
So all different kinds of writing?
Yeah, I've been writing. I started as a journalism graduate, going into corporate journalism, communication. Started writing for sports magazines, and then that morphed into online communication. So I was involved doing websites with companies when we used to make websites out of crayon back in the 90s, and it's just morphed from there. So I now lecture in communication at a university down here. I have corporate clients that I write for, and it's morphed into fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just me. Somebody asked me in an interview last year, why do you write? And the answer is, I don't know how not to.
Mm.
My mum used to say that the minute I could hold a pen, I did. And that's just me. That's just how I express myself. So it's just the way that I engage with
Yeah,
the world.
I think that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
then before we go, did you want to tell us quickly about your nonfiction books too?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote my first nonfiction book was in the field of health. So and this is written sort of 13, 14 years ago, but I wrote a book for couples who couldn't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about helping men understand the whole process of what it's like to go through infertility. And that book's called Swimming Upstream. And that was one of the first books ever written globally about the male side of coping with infertility. And I just found that fascinating to just talk to guys who had no idea what was going on with their family. And so that was a fascinating exercise in research as much as writing. And that book did well in a number of countries, just to show that the experience is shared globally.
Yeah.
But I tend to write nonfiction stuff that's specific to the moment. So I had a range of clients a few years ago where I was working with schools and helping them to understand social media and how to use it and what the risks were. So I wrote a book about that. And there are a number of books coming that are specific to writing in terms of how do you, it's a toolkit kind of thing. So that's where I'm heading next with the nonfiction. But again, it's just, I look at an issue and I think, all right, what can I write about that? And that's just how I respond.
That's on your mind or that you're curious about.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I'm a writer. I say to people that, when they ask about my business, look, I'm a freelance writer, and the standard joke is, when I want to write for money, I have clients, and when I don't, I write fiction.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Yeah, and it'd be nice if it was the other way around, but it's I put words on the screen, and I have every day for 30 odd years. So, and I really enjoy it. It's what I'm cut out to do.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful, and you have such an encouraging story. And thank you for sharing with us today.
Pleasure, Terry.
I think that I have all your links that you sent me before, and I will attach those with this video so people can find you and find.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me. It's been really good to talk to you.
Thank you.